My name is Rachel Bennett, and for 14 years, I believed I had built a marriage that could survive anything. Long nights, endless business trips, missed anniversaries. I told myself every sacrifice had a purpose because my husband and I were building something together. That Friday morning, I carried a bouquet of white lilies through the lobby of Everstone Health Systems with a smile I had not worn in months. Tucked inside my handbag were 2 first-class tickets to Napa Valley for our anniversary weekend. Daniel had been under enormous pressure preparing for a major partnership, and I wanted to remind him that before the company, before the investors, before the headlines, we had once been 2 ordinary people dreaming about an extraordinary future. The receptionist greeted me politely, but never asked my name. She assumed I was another guest attending the celebration upstairs. I simply smiled and followed the sound of applause echoing through the building. As the elevator doors opened, I saw hundreds of employees gathered around a decorated stage. Gold balloons floated above them while cameras recorded every moment. Standing in the center was Daniel, dressed in his favorite navy suit, smiling with a confidence that had helped him win every room he ever entered. Beside him stood Lauren Mitchell, our company's young CEO. Then Daniel reached into his jacket. He dropped onto one knee. The room erupted with cheers before my mind could even understand what my eyes were seeing. Lauren covered her mouth in disbelief as Daniel held up a diamond ring that caught every light in the room. She nodded. He slipped the ring onto her finger. Then he kissed her while everyone applauded. Someone beside me whispered that they were the perfect couple. That was the exact moment Daniel looked across the crowd and saw me standing there, still holding the flowers I had bought for him. His smile disappeared. For a brief second, neither of us moved. I turned around without saying a single word. I left the flowers in the back seat of my car. Then I reached for my phone. I was about to make one call that would change every one of our lives forever. I sat behind the steering wheel for several minutes, staring at the windshield without really seeing anything. The bouquet rested on the passenger seat, untouched, while the anniversary tickets remained inside my purse. Just an hour earlier, I had imagined Daniel smiling as we escaped for a quiet weekend together. Now those tickets belonged to a life that no longer existed. I opened the airline app and canceled the reservation.
No hesitation.
No second thoughts. Then I called Richard Hayes, the attorney who had represented my family for more than 20 years. He answered after the second ring. "Rachel, is everything all right?" I looked back at the towering glass headquarters where employees were probably still celebrating the engagement they believed was real.
No, Richard.
It isn't. I need you to activate every protection clause under Bennett Family Holdings immediately. His voice became serious. What happened? My husband just proposed to another woman in front of the entire company. Silence filled the line. Finally, he spoke. "Tell me exactly what you need. Suspend every joint financial account. Freeze every discretionary transfer. Withdraw our holding company's financial commitment from Everstone Health Systems until further notice." Richard did not interrupt. He understood exactly what those instructions meant. "Rachel, once we do this, the banks will react immediately."
I know.
"The board will be forced to respond." "I know." "The acquisition scheduled for next week could collapse." I closed my eyes and remembered Daniel smiling as he slipped a ring onto another woman's finger.
Do it anyway.
Within minutes, Richard confirmed the paperwork had been submitted. For the first time in years, I wasn't acting like a patient wife, hoping things would improve. I was acting like the majority owner protecting everything my family had built. As I started the engine, my phone lit up. "Daniel." I declined the call. It rang again. Then again. By the time I reached the highway, the screen showed more missed calls than I could count. Only then did I realize he had finally discovered that the woman he betrayed had the power to bring his entire world to a standstill. It took Daniel less than 40 minutes to find me.
The
doorbell rang just as the sun was beginning to disappear behind the maple trees lining our quiet street. I didn't rush to answer. I simply stood in the hallway, listening to the impatient knocking grow louder. Then I heard his voice. "Rachel, please open the door. I know you're home." I looked through the narrow window beside the entrance. His expensive sedan was parked crookedly in the driveway. His tie was loose, his hair was messy, and the confidence he carried on stage only an hour earlier had completely vanished. I unlocked the door, but opened it only halfway. For a moment neither of us spoke. "Rachel," he whispered, "it isn't what you think." I studied his face without anger, without tears, just curiosity. "Really? Then tell me exactly what I misunderstood." He rubbed both hands across his face before taking a slow breath. "Lauren doesn't know." I kept my expression calm. "Doesn't know what?" "That we're still together." His words landed softly, but they struck harder than any shout ever could. "Still together?" "Daniel, we shared breakfast this morning. You kissed me goodbye before leaving for work. You slept in this house last night. When exactly did we stop being together?" He lowered his eyes. "It's complicated." I almost laughed.
No.
Building software is complicated. Running a billion-dollar company is complicated. Lying to your wife is actually very simple. He took one step closer. "I never wanted this to happen." "Then answer one question. Just one. If everyone inside that building believed you were free to marry another woman, what exactly did you tell them about your wife?" The color drained from his face. He opened his mouth. Nothing came out. That silence answered every question I had carried for months. The late meetings, the canceled vacations, the business trips that always lasted one more night. None of them had been accidents. They had been carefully constructed pieces of another life. His phone suddenly vibrated again. He glanced at the screen and immediately looked away. I had already seen enough. The caller was the chairman of the board. For the first time that evening, Daniel looked less like a husband asking for forgiveness, and more like a man, realizing his entire future had just begun falling apart. Daniel leaned against the porch railing and covered his face with both hands. For the first time in years, he looked exhausted instead of confident. The man who could charm investors, inspire employees, and command every meeting suddenly couldn't find the courage to look his own wife in the eyes. Finally, he spoke. "I told Lauren we had been separated for almost 2 years." The words settled between us like cold rain.
Separated.
I repeated the word quietly, almost to myself. "Then why did you come home every night?" He swallowed. "I was trying to figure things out."
No.
"You already figured them out. You simply expected me to live inside a lie I didn't even know existed." He looked toward the street, avoiding my eyes. I continued before he could invent another excuse. Every business trip, every late board meeting, every weekend conference. Were those real? Most of them were.
Most.
That single word told me everything. I suddenly remembered all the little moments I had ignored, because love often teaches people to explain away what should never need an explanation. The anniversary dinner he canceled because a client supposedly arrived from Chicago. The weekend retreat that somehow lasted until Monday morning. The hotel receipts he claimed accounting had booked by mistake. The phone calls he always took outside. None of those memories felt confusing anymore. They fit together perfectly, like pieces of a puzzle I had refused to solve. Daniel finally looked at me again. "I never wanted to hurt you." I nodded slowly. Very few people wake up hoping to destroy someone's heart. They simply keep choosing themselves until everyone else becomes collateral damage. He stared at me in silence. I continued. "You didn't betray me in one afternoon. You betrayed me one decision at a time, one excuse at a time, one lie at a time. By the time you stood on that stage today, the proposal wasn't the beginning. It was simply the first time your private life became public." His shoulders sank. For the first time since arriving at our house, he stopped trying to defend himself. Deep down, he knew something I already understood. Affairs rarely begin with one terrible choice. They begin with countless small choices that eventually become impossible to hide. Daniel finally broke the silence. "You're angry." I looked at him for several seconds before answering.
No.
"I'm disappointed that after everything we built together, you actually believed you could erase me." He frowned. "I never tried to erase you. Didn't you?" I folded my arms and glanced toward the house behind me. "Do you remember the first office? The tiny room above a hardware store with stained carpet and one old coffee maker that barely worked." His expression softened. "Of course I do. Back then, we couldn't afford employees. I designed the software during the day and fixed bugs through the night. You spent your days meeting hospitals, convincing people to believe in an idea that barely existed. When investors laughed at us, my father didn't. He invested because he trusted me, not because he trusted you. Daniel remained silent. After my father passed away, every one of his shares transferred into Bennett Family Holdings exactly as he had planned. As the company expanded, we never sold control. Every funding round, every stock buyback, every legal agreement, Richard made sure our family's ownership remained protected. I looked directly into Daniel's eyes. Do you know why I stayed out of interviews? He answered quietly. Because you hated publicity. I shook my head.
No.
Because you convinced me the company needed one public face. You said it would simplify everything for investors. You promised that whether my name appeared in magazines or not, we would always be equal. For years, I believed you. While reporters called you the founder, I corrected no one. While conferences introduced you as the visionary behind Everstone, I smiled from the audience. While employees thanked you for creating their careers, I quietly celebrated their success. None of those things ever bothered me. Until today. Today, I realized something painful. You didn't simply enjoy the recognition. You started believing it belonged only to you. Daniel lowered his head. Rachel. I interrupted him gently. You forgot one very important truth. Fame and ownership are not the same
thing.
The cameras followed you. The magazines admired you. The employees looked up to you. But this company was never yours alone. It never had been. And tomorrow morning, the board was finally going to learn that truth. The emergency board meeting began at exactly 7:30 the next morning. I joined from the library in our home with Richard seated beside me. He had 2 legal folders neatly arranged on the table, though I already knew every document inside them. One by one, the directors appeared on the screen. Some looked confused. Others looked exhausted. None of them smiled. Daniel joined last. He was sitting in the executive conference room, wearing a fresh suit as though changing clothes could somehow erase yesterday's disaster. For a brief moment, our eyes met. Then the chairman cleared his throat. We have received formal notice that Bennett Family Holdings has suspended all discretionary financial support for Everstone Health Systems, effective immediately. The room became silent. The chairman turned toward me. Mrs. Bennett, can you confirm this notice is authentic? Yes. Can you also confirm that Bennett Family Holdings remains the controlling shareholder of Everstone Health Systems? Yes. Another long silence followed. Several directors exchanged surprised glances. One finally leaned toward his camera. Controlling shareholder? Richard calmly slid a document toward my webcam. Current ownership stands at 79.4% through Bennett Family Holdings. The directors stared at the report. One of them whispered something under his breath. Another removed his glasses and rubbed his forehead. Years of assumptions disappeared in a matter of seconds. They had spent years believing Daniel owned the company simply because he was always standing in front of the cameras. The chairman slowly turned toward Daniel. Is this ownership structure accurate? Daniel nodded without speaking. His confidence had vanished. Then another face appeared on the video call. Lauren Mitchell. She looked directly at me with obvious confusion. After several seconds, realization slowly spread across her face. You're Rachel Bennett, Daniel's wife. I answered quietly. Yes. Lauren's expression collapsed. She looked toward Daniel as though waiting for him to deny it. He couldn't. For the first time since this nightmare began, Lauren understood she had never been standing beside a divorced executive. She had been standing beside a married man living a carefully constructed lie. The chairman folded his hands. Mr. Bennett, before this meeting continues, is there anything else the board needs to know? Daniel opened his mouth. But this time, the truth was no longer something he could control. The meeting ended without a single raised voice. No one needed to argue. Facts had done all the talking. Later that afternoon, as I sat alone in the kitchen with a cup of coffee that had long since gone cold, my phone rang. Lauren Mitchell. I stared at her name for several seconds before answering.
Hello.
Her voice was almost unrecognizable.
Soft.
Careful. Rachel. I know I probably don't deserve a conversation with you. I remained quiet. She continued.
I didn't know.
Daniel told me he had been divorced for nearly 2 years. He showed me an apartment downtown. He said you had both moved on and were only delaying the paperwork because of financial agreements. I closed my eyes. Another lie. Another carefully constructed story. He even had proof. Lauren's voice trembled. I feel sick. Every memory I've shared with him feels fake now. I believed every word he said. For the first time since everything had happened, I wasn't listening to a woman defending herself. I was listening to someone whose life had also been built on deception. I finally spoke. I believe you. She let out a slow breath. Thank you. But believing you doesn't erase what happened.
I know.
There was another long silence. Then she quietly asked the question she had probably been afraid to say out loud. Can you ever forgive me? I looked out the window at the empty backyard where Daniel and I had once hosted summer barbecues for friends and employees. I don't know you well enough to forgive you. Forgiveness belongs to people who have shared a relationship. You and I never had one. She accepted my answer without arguing. That's fair. Before ending the call, I offered her one piece of
advice.
Don't spend the rest of your life blaming yourself for another person's lies. Learn from them. Walk away from them. But don't let them convince you that you deserve them. When the call ended, I realized something unexpected. Lauren had never been the woman who destroyed my marriage. She was simply another person standing in the wreckage of the same lie. And the man responsible for all of it had not yet faced the consequences that were still waiting for him. 2 days later, Richard called before sunrise. Rachel, I need you at my office. His voice was calm, but I had known him long enough to recognize the weight hiding beneath those few words. An hour later, I sat across from him as he spread dozens of folders across the conference table. Expense reports, executive approvals, vendor contracts, stock authorizations. At first glance, everything appeared perfectly ordinary. Then Richard slid one document toward me. Do you recognize this signature? I looked down. It was my name, Rachel Bennett, written exactly the way I signed legal documents for years. I frowned. I never signed this. Richard nodded. That's what I believed. He placed another page beside it. This one contained my authentic signature from a shareholder agreement completed 3 years earlier. The difference was subtle, almost invisible. But once I noticed it, I couldn't unsee it. Someone had copied my signature with remarkable precision. My stomach tightened. How many? Richard slowly removed his glasses. We're still counting. The forensic team has already identified dozens of questionable authorizations. Every one of them carries your name. He opened another folder. Luxury travel approved under executive development. Consulting payments sent to companies with no legitimate business relationship. Fast-tracked contracts bypassing normal review procedures. Each approval carried my forged signature. Daniel hadn't simply lied about our marriage. Someone had been using my identity to move company money for years. I leaned back in my chair, trying to steady my breathing. The affair had shattered my heart. These documents threatened to destroy an entire corporation. Richard folded his hands. The investigators believe this wasn't impulsive. It was organized. Every transaction was small enough to avoid attention. Every document looked legitimate on its own. Only when they were placed together did the pattern become impossible to ignore. I stared at the growing stack of evidence. For years, I thought I had been watching my husband become someone I no longer recognized. Now I understood something far more frightening. The man I married had been disappearing long before I ever noticed. Richard quietly closed the final folder. Rachel, this is no longer just a divorce. This is becoming a criminal investigation. And once the board sees these documents, there will be no way back for Daniel Bennett. The special board meeting lasted less than 90 minutes. No one interrupted. No one defended Daniel. The evidence spoke with a clarity that no explanation could overcome. The forensic investigators presented every questionable transaction in chronological order. Each forged authorization led to another. Each hidden payment uncovered another layer of deception. When they finished, the chairman folded his hands and looked directly at Daniel. Do you wish to respond before the board votes? Daniel took a slow breath. I made mistakes. Some decisions crossed lines that never should have been crossed. But I built this company. Without me, none of this would exist. For a moment, no one said anything. Then one of the oldest directors quietly answered. You helped build this company. That doesn't give you permission to steal from it. The vote was unanimous. Daniel Bennett was immediately removed as Chief Executive Officer. His remaining executive authority was revoked. Every unvested stock award was canceled. Outside legal counsel would begin civil recovery proceedings, while the forensic report would be forwarded to the appropriate authorities for further review. Daniel didn't argue. He simply stared at the conference table as though the room had disappeared around him. That evening, just before sunset, he came back to the house. This time, he knocked only once. When I opened the door, he looked older than he had just 3 days earlier. Not because of gray hair or wrinkles, because hope had finally left his eyes. I lost everything, he said quietly. I looked at him for a long moment.
No.
You lost everything you chose to build on lies. The truth is still standing. He lowered his head.
I'm sorry, Rachel.
I should have listened to you years ago. I should have remembered who stood beside me before anyone knew my name. His voice broke. Can you ever forgive me? I answered honestly. One day, I may forgive you. Forgiveness helps the person who was hurt. But forgiveness doesn't erase consequences. It doesn't restore trust. And it doesn't rebuild a life that someone else chose to destroy. For the first time since our marriage began, Daniel had nothing left to negotiate. He quietly turned around and walked back toward his car. Neither of us looked back. 6 months later, the divorce was finalized. It wasn't dramatic. There were no shouting matches in a courtroom. No last-minute attempts to change each other's minds. Only signatures.
Documents.
And 2 people walking away from a life that could never be rebuilt. The investigation eventually confirmed that Lauren had never participated in the financial misconduct. She had been deceived just as completely as I had. The board asked her to remain as Chief Executive Officer. She accepted with one promise. Every major decision would be guided by transparency instead of image. A week later, the chairman called me with another proposal. Rachel, the company needs you. Will you become CEO? Years earlier, I would have accepted without hesitation. Instead, I smiled.
No.
There was a brief silence. May I ask why? Because leadership isn't about standing in front of cameras. It's about putting the right people in the right places. I accepted the position of executive chair instead, focusing on long-term strategy while allowing Lauren to lead the daily operations. For the first time in years, Everstone felt honest again. Not perfect, but honest. One afternoon, while organizing my desk, I found the envelope containing the anniversary tickets I had bought for Daniel. The flights had long been canceled. The reservation no longer existed. I held the tickets for several moments before quietly placing them into the shredder. Not because I hated the memories, because I no longer needed to carry them. That evening, I opened my laptop and booked another trip. The same destination, Napa Valley. This time, there would be only one ticket. During the trip, I spent my mornings walking through quiet vineyards and my evenings watching the sunset over endless rows of grapevines. For the first time in years, my future belonged entirely to me.
No excuses.
No waiting. No wondering whether someone else's promises would become reality. Standing beneath the golden evening sky, I finally understood something I wish I had learned much sooner. The greatest victory isn't watching the person who hurt you lose everything. It's discovering that your happiness was never dependent on them in the first place. That realization brought me something revenge never could.
Peace.
Looking back now, people often ask whether justice made everything better. The honest answer is no. Justice gave me accountability. Time gave me healing. Daniel lost his marriage because he chose deception over honesty. He lost his career because he placed ambition above integrity. He lost the company because he forgot that trust is earned every single day and can disappear in a single moment. As for me, I didn't move forward because his life fell apart. I moved forward because I finally remembered my own value. If someone fails to appreciate your loyalty, your kindness, or your sacrifices, that doesn't reduce your worth. It simply reveals the limits of their character. Never allow another person's betrayal to become the measure of your future. Protect your peace. Protect your integrity. And never be afraid to walk away from anyone who repeatedly gives you reasons to doubt your value. Thank you for spending your time with me today. If this story touched your heart, I'd truly love to hear your thoughts. What would you have done if you had been in Rachel's position? Would you have made the same decision? Or would you have chosen a different path? Share your perspective in the comments because your story may encourage someone who needs it today. If you enjoy heartfelt stories about relationships, resilience, justice, and second chances, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who might need this reminder. Until next time, take care of yourself, choose honesty, and never forget that your greatest strength is knowing your own worth.